Okay, welcome everyone. We are going to go ahead and get started with the intermediate side of building dashboards. And I'll give you just a couple minutes if here's the link to get into the presentation. I do want to I have several team members with me today that are helping to facilitate, and so I appreciate them and their help. So again, if you will check the chat, the link to the presentation is in the chat. Also, if you have questions throughout this, just throw those questions in the question and answer document, and we'll try to get to those at the end. We should have some time at the end to do that. If you were in the earlier session, a little bit will be redundant, but we are pretty much in this session. We're only going to talk about the formulas and the formulas that we can use to format our data the way that we want it to appear. So again, all right, I have 3:02. I think we are good to start.
Can you share your screen, Leanne?
Yes, I will. That's why I have awesome teammates. They remind me I'm forgetting stuff. Okay, so again, I'm Leanne Holmes. I have been with DPI for about a year and a half, but this is also my 31st year in education. And so I like what I'm going to show you today, but we are going to, again, we're going to concentrate mostly on the formula side and outputting our information the way we want to see it using a formula that I think you're going to like in building your data dashboards. So as we get started with this, I always like to say that insights is extremely important because having that data in real time, having it in a timely manner that you can use it to make your decisions, your data-driven decisions quickly and effectively is extremely important in any kind of environment that you're in. And so I just think that the real-time data that we can get through the Insights dashboards is unparalleled to anything. I've mentioned before that I built a lot of dashboards for different stakeholders, and my dashboards were only as good as I could pull the data and update my dashboard. But what you're getting in Infinite Campus is you're able to get dashboards that are in real time, and as the data goes in, you can pull the data, and it's data that's happened that's in your system. Okay, so let's go on. And our agenda for today is we're going to talk about formulas and insights. And again, this session is intended to be an advanced session. So I'm not going to show you how to share out. I'm not going to show you how to create a different chart or something like that. I mean, we'll do some of that, but that's not what's intended. Most of what's intended here today is to teach you some of the insight formulas, help you understand how to apply those formulas. We're going to look at building some advanced formulas and using those advanced formulas in with being able to format our data the way that we would like to see that data. I do have some practice tasks because I feel like that the best way that you learn is by doing it. And then, of course, our wrap up at the end for your feedback. So the first thing we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about how to aggregate our data with the custom formulas. And I throw this in because I think this is important. Why do you want to modify your formulas? All right, well, if I just pull up information like these are simple graphs of tardies by grade level. But if you're looking at this, if I do tardies by grade level on this one shows that I have 350 students in grade 9 that have tardies. However, what if there are 300 students in grade 9, and what if there's only 200 students in grade 12? All right, well, then 300 to 200, that's not a good apples to apples comparison here. So you want to be able to change your formula to represent your data better. So for example, in here, this is showing me now that with my ninth graders, they're roughly 28% of my tardies are coming from ninth grader, which again, there's not a big discrepancy, but there is between ninth grade and 10th grade. And so that's something that you can look at. So you've got 28% and about 21% of 10th graders. So 7 percentage points there is your difference. So that's why you want to be able to modify your formula so that you can show your data in different ways and ways that make sense to your stakeholders. Okay. Right. As we're going on through this, I want to talk to you a little bit about default values. Now, what default values are is when we actually add a formula, there are some default values for pretty much everything. And so when you see something that says count, that means that that data field is a text field, or in computer science, we call it a string, but it is a text field or a string field. And you will notice that that has the word count. But when you see a data field, a field type that has the word sum, then that means that is coming in as an actual number. And if it's a number, then we can actually do some calculations on that. And the most common ones are mean, median, and mode. Those are some of the calculations that we can actually do on these values that are within your system. So when you see count, that means it's a string. When you see sum, that means that it is usually a number, but if I click the summation, I'm going to see other things like standard deviation. I'll just see some different formulas when I see something that has a sum beside it. Okay. Now, also, when you're talking about string, the two main ones that you use on string are the ones that's called count and distinct count. And so when you are doing count, I do an example here. If I'm out in the field and in person, I always use this example that, like, if I'm counting the fruit that I have on the screen, that would be a count. Well, this count of this would be 4. But if I'm doing a distinct count, how many distinct pieces of fruit are there, then the count would be 3 because there's 2 apples. So it'd be apple, banana, and orange. So there's only 3. That is the difference between count and distinct count. So now where that matters is if I want to know the number of just the total number, and we'll look at this, but just the total number of absences or total number of tardies that I have, then I would use count. But if I wanted to know the total number of students, distinct students that have at least one tardy, then I would use distinct count. And that's the difference in when that you would use those. Right. So now I'm going to go on and we're going to build some stuff. But this is, if you were in the earlier session, this is the same screen that I showed you earlier. However, added a few things with the formulas. So if I want to know how many events were assigned in this office referral, how many events, you would do an account, because the count would be, these are events. I would just count 1, 2, 3. There are 3 events. 2 of them were fighting and 1 of them was disrespect, and they're on 2 different students. But if I wanted to count how many different events were assigned in this office referral, then I would look at my event ID and I would do a distinct count of that event ID. So my distinct count would give me 1 and 2, because there are 2 different events that were assigned in this office referral. It was fighting and it was disrespect of staff. And that's the difference between count and distinct count when you're looking at that. I will say, when you are aggregating your behavior fields, when you're do a lot of checks on that behavior data, because if I'm going to aggregate this, it is always, it's looking at the aggregation according to the student perspective. All right. So if this student is in 9th grade, the student's in 10th grade, and I aggregate it by grade level, then that means that how many events does this student have? They has 2. How many events does this one have? They have 1, 2 for the 9th grade, and it's going to add 1 for the 10th grade. So it's always going to aggregate your data according to the students that are in your actual data. So always make sure that you check, and I'll show you how to do that as you're checking your data. Okay, now, if something is a number, So remember, I told you it's a number if it has the word sum beside it. So when you hit sum, you're going to see sum, average, mean, median. You're going to see, well, I say mean, but it's average. You're going to see average. You'll see min, max. All of these that you see are actually calculations that you can do on a number. So there are many math formulas that are available for a number. Okay. So now let's get into how you create one. So when you're creating a calculated value, the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to first add the calculated value. Then you're going to enter a name. And this is the one that I always forget. So I always forget. I'm going to click here. Step 2 is I'm going to put a name, because if you put a name, that means that your graph has a name. That means that the data that you output, each column will have a name that is descriptive of what's happening. Okay, so then the next thing that you're going to do is you're going to click the Sigma button. And when you click the Sigma button is where that you get all of these different formulas that you could possibly use for that data field. Now, the next thing that you're going to do in step 5 is you're going to take that formula. Once you change it here, you're going to click on the formula and you're going to drag it down to the editor. And then we're going to also do some editing within this editor. We're going to add our own numbers to it if we choose to. All right. Now, I'm going to do this one again because it's an important one. It's an easy one to help you understand the difference between count and distinct count. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to build this. How many office referrals are there? And so when you are doing office referrals, if I do a count of it, I'm going to get 116. But if I do a distinct count, it's going to give me 72. Which one is correct? So let's build this one. So I'm going to go into my training site. And I'm going to go into Insights. And I'm going to go into my behavior. And I'm going into my events by grade. So the first thing, if you were in the earlier session, you just have to be in a habit of selecting early warning, or you can click on your fields and drag it off. Okay. Now, I want to build one that just has my incident IDs. So I really don't care about, I want the student grade and I want the event name, but I don't want to aggregate by those at this point. So I'm going to drag my incident ID. And I'm going to take off I'm going to leave count of behavior and count of students. Except I'm going to change this count of behavior because I don't like to use a person ID. I want to use the, actually I'm going to leave that. I won't apply. All right, if I hover over this, I have 116. Now, one thing I didn't show you in the earlier session, so those of you that you're doing this one in addition to the one that you did this morning, notice that in my formula fields, this count of behavior is what's called just the count. It's counting every behavior that's been added into the system. So if I do, and this count of students is counting my distinct count of students. So if I want to know how many behaviors I have in the system, then if I hover over this, there are 116. But if I want to know out of these 116 behaviors, how many, because I may have repeat students. So how many of those students are actually unique students? So if I change this now to count of students, what this is doing is this is giving me my distinct count of students. And if I hover over it, I know that I have 73 students that have at least some kind of office referral event attached to their name. Now, you would want to dig down a little deeper because when you are doing this, you want to make sure that you filter. I don't really want victim, so I want to take out victim. And that changed it down to 72. But I have 72 unique students. And if you look at your fields that you've just done, this is distinct count. So that's going to give me the distinct count of student person ID. Think of distinct count of student numbers. If a student number is listed more than once, it's like the apples and oranges. It's only going to count that student number one time. And so I have 72 students that have some kind of event. But this one only counts every student that has some kind of behavior event attached to their name. And so if I do, no matter how many events, it's going to count them all. So if I change this to count of behavior, there's 120. Now, to better understand that, my suggestion to you is that you double click. And as I'm looking through some of this information, what I can do is I can come and I can sort by my person ID. Over there to it. I've learned that sometimes if this is in the way, I can't get to it. But if I can sort by my person ID, notice that it's putting them in order. So when it puts them in order, notice I have 115 here. If I go down and take a look, and this person, even though they're listed 3 times, if I want to know the unique, it's only going to count this person 1 time. And that's how I started learning how to do the different formulas and learning if my data was correct. What I just did is what I suggest that you do is that you always double check your data and make sure that you've done your formula correctly. I can't say that enough. When you start playing around with these formulas, then you're going to understand that the data needs to be right, needs to be correct. And so you need to check it and double check it. Sort of like Santa Claus, you need to check it and double check it. But if I wanted to know how many office referrals, well, if you go back to your picture, I know that incident ID is my office referral. So I'm going to take off count of behavior and I'm going to pull over my incident ID. And when I pull over incident ID, I'm going to change it. And so the way that I change it is I'm going to do a distinct count of my incident ID. And as I'm doing that, it's going to give me pretty much the same thing. But my distinct count of my incident IDs is going to give me, it should give me 72 because that means that there are 72 office referrals. Now, if I wanted to do this by grade level, I like to show when you're figuring out your formulas. If I want to aggregate this by grade level, I'm going to pull my columns over to my grade level. Okay. If you notice in my grade levels, if I counted this up, this would not add up to 72. Because the reason it will not add up to 72 because it's now aggregated by grade level. And so if you're looking at your data and I go back to my picture, it's going to count if this student, even though this is under 1 incident, it's going to count because this student may be in 9th grade, this student may be in 10th grade. So that's why it doesn't mean that your data is wrong. It's just now because of the way that I'm aggregating the data in my fields, it is aggregating it according to grade level. And so it's counting, it's doing a distinct count of the office referrals per student. So again, if this student had gotten in trouble, this same student had gotten in trouble in a different incident, then that student would have a total of 2 instead of 1, like they do now. Okay. All right, let's go on. And I want to know the next one that I have in your presentation is I want to know what are the percent of tardies by the grade level. Okay, what are the percent of tardies by the grade level? So the first thing you have to figure out is what do I start with? So we were talking about behavior. We started out with a behavior template. What am I going to start with for this one? I'm probably going to go do my insights. I'm going to look under the attendance and I'm probably going to do, I want to know their tardies. I could do absenteeism. It really doesn't matter because I'm changing it up. Either one that you want to do. I'm going to do status by period. Okay. Now, when you pull this one up, notice that it's got absenteeism and tardies. So the first thing you need to do is you need to filter. So I'm going to go to early warning. I'm going to select all. The next thing I'm going to take off under my attendance status. I don't want absent. I only want my tardies. So I want to know my tardies. The next thing is I know that I've got some periods that's outside the school day. So I am going to take off my, I'm going to filter again and take off those periods. So attendance period. And under my fields, I really don't care about the excuse type. They're tardy or not tardy. That's really all I care about. How many tardies do my students have? So I'm going to do my attendance status. I don't really care about period, but the question was the percent of tardies by my grade level. So I'm going to actually pull in my students' grade level. And it's already in my filters, but I'm going to drag it from the left side. And there's my student grade level. Click off status and click apply. All right. Now, this is all red. If I want it to be green, if I want it to have different colors, I'm going to put it over here and click apply. Now, as I'm looking at this, this is the one that I showed you earlier. This is my count of attendance. I have 350. But if I go into my fields and I look at my students, I know that it's doing a distinct count. So I want to know, out of all of these tardies in the 9th grade, how many students is that involving? So that would be your distinct count. So here's the count of students. There's my distinct count of students. Okay. If I also wanted to know, I want to change this now to percent. So the way you change this to percent is under my fields. I can click here, add a calculated value, or you can also click the, well, I just lost the calculator. You can also click the calculator here and it will do the same thing, but I'm going to add a calculated value. And so the next thing that I'm going to do is give it a name. So I'm going to call this percent of tardies. Give it a name, percent of tardies. And then I'm going to come down and I'm going to find, what am I trying to count? Well, I want to know, and I'm just going to keep it on my person ID because it's counting the students, and I've already aggregated it according to the way that I want it. I've already chosen tardies. I've already chosen that I want it by grade level. So I don't have to worry about doing that up. I can just count my student IDs. But I am going to change this, and I'm going to change it now to my percent of my row. Percent of row. And I'm going to click on that and I'm going to drag it down. And when I do that, I'm going to click apply and apply. And now I'm going to come up to my formulas and I'm going to say my percent of tardies. And now I've got a better picture because I can see that I have almost 29% of my tardies are coming from my 9th grade. The second highest is my 11th grade. Third highest is my 12th graders, and 10th graders have the lowest, sitting here at 21.3%. And so just by making a simple calculation, I was able to change the actual data for this by changing this to percent. But I also want you to realize that when I add this formula title, notice that over here on the left side, it changes the title on my graph. So if I'm going to share this out, I've got a title now that actually makes sense. Now, what if I wanted to aggregate this by gender? I want to know the percent of tardies by grade level and by gender. Okay, so that is a simple, I've got it already on percent, but I want to change it to grade level and gender. So there's my grade. I'm just going to take gender and I'm going to add gender here under the rows and click apply. Now, that's really not the way that I want to see it. I want to actually see, I don't want male and female. I want to actually see them side by side on the grade level because I want to see which grade level. I want to do a grade level by grade level comparison. So I'm just going to move these around. I'm going to move student grade to my rows and gender to my columns and click apply. And now what I have is and I'm going to do a count. If I do a count, I have count of all the tardies that the student has. And I would probably, even though it says count of attendance, I know that I have this filtered by just my tardies. I would probably change this formula too to say count of tardies. You do not have to leave those formulas on what they had it. But I'm going to say count tardies and apply. So my count of tardies, it shows me that I have this. If I change it, this shows me my unique students by grade level and by male, female, but then I want to do my percent. And if you notice in my percent, I have this set to percent of the row. And so it's going to take my grade 12. This is 57, about 58%. This one is 42%, which will, if you take those two together, they're going to add up to 100%. And so I aggregated this according to the row. So it's actually doing my percentages within my grade level. So here's grade 12, Same thing with grade 9. They're pretty close neck and neck, almost a little bit over 50% and 49%. But I'm telling you that I'm spending some time there because I like to do that to check my formulas because I want to see this data by percentages within each grade level and in the ratio of male to female. And so if I wanted to look at this on a grid, it looks a little messy. Okay, by doing this, it looks a little messy just looking at it this way because there's those percent of tardies, but I can see my under 10th grade, I can see my female, my male, and my total tardy counts. Right? Now, what I'm going to show you is we're going to aggregate this a little differently because I want this, first of all, I don't want all these decimal places. All right, and I want to really use this chart as I'm going to share this out to different stakeholders. So I want to clean it up here and not have to do any external work within Excel or whatever. So I'm going to go in, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take off these decimal places. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to format my cells. And when I click format my cells, you choose your value that you're formatting. Well, your value comes from the values, your formulas that you have created down here. So if you notice, this is my percent of my row. And so that I'm calling it percent of tardies. So when I come in format, I'm going to format my cells and I'm going to choose percent of tardies. I don't want any decimal places. So I want it to round. So I'm just going to say I don't want any decimal places. And I'm going to do something else. I want this to be formatted as a percent because I want those pretty percent signs on my data. So I'm going to click true. And when I click true and apply, now you're going to think, oh, great, I did something wrong. Well, you didn't really do anything wrong. It took that number and it formatted it as a percent like you asked it to do. But what I want it to show is I want it to show a true 51%, a true 46%. So what you do is you come into your formula and you see where it says percent of tardies. I click that percent button, and down where it says percent of row, I want to force it to be a percent. So the way I force it to be a percent is I'm going to move that decimal place 2 places. So I'm going to divide by 100. And I'm going to click apply and apply. And now look what you have. You have nice, pretty percents in your table. All right. Now, if you did not want to see these column totals over here, then you can easily, under your options, I can take off and say, don't show subtotals. I only want to see the grand total. I always get that mixed up. I don't want to show subtotals, and I only want to show for columns only, and click apply. And now I've even cleaned it up even more to where I'm just seeing my percent of tardies, and I'm seeing it as numbers. So now I can clearly see 51% of my females are tardy in 10th grade, 49% of my males are tardy. Now, what if I wanted to take it a step further and I wanted to highlight the ones that are above 50%? I want to highlight all the percentages that are above 50%. Well, my formula is correct. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my format and I'm going to do conditional formatting. And I'm going to click add condition. And what am I formatting? I'm formatting my percents, my percent of tardies. And you have to realize, now the next question, the question was any percentages that are above 50%. So I want it to be greater than. And I can't put this. I can't do 50%. It doesn't recognize that because it doesn't let me put a percent. I can't do 50 because that's the number 50. What I have to do is I have to say 0.50 or 0.5, either one of them. But I want to do the percent of tardies. And then you got to say, what do you want to happen to those? Well, I just want to highlight that cell. So I'm going to click on my A. So I'm clicking here on the A. And then I'm going to click on highlight. And when I click on highlight, I'm going to click the red, go, and I'm going to make it a little lighter. And I'm going to click it and click apply. And click apply. And now look what happens. Now I have all the percentages that it is, if it is above 50%, then I have it highlighted. I have it in a nice percentage format. I can come back to my column. Now that does not affect this graph at all. What it does affect is if you hover over it, then it's going to show 54%, and it will have your percent sign out to the side and your 46%. But how did I get that percent under my fields? I went and changed it to percent of tardies, and I added my own little formula that said divided by 100 here. All right, now I'm gonna pause before we go on and do some more. I'm gonna pause and see if there are any questions. And Chris, are there any questions in the document?
Leanne, we just had one dropped in, and the question is, can you format the graph to show data numbers on the collared columns? I know you can get the number by hovering on the column.
You
Is there any way
cannot,
to actually,
and
yeah.
I wish you could. You cannot, because any graphs that I used to create, I would always put the percentage or the number above it because it makes it more easy. It's a lot easier to read, but you cannot. You cannot. If you were going to do that, and also another thing that I would do is all the graphs that I would build for stakeholders, I would format them in our district colors because that's just what we decided that we needed to do in our district. So if you were going to do that, you would have to do export, and then you can do an export to Excel, and then you can go in and add and do your own aggregation of your data. You would basically take this grid if you wanted to and pull it into Excel, create your own chart, and add your colors to it there. But that's a good question. Get asked that one a lot. I wish you could. Wish you could. Okay. All right, so let's go on and let's talk about some more formulas. I never get phone calls until I do a webinar, and then they all call. The next question that I have in your presentation is create the average of posted percents per course and by course and section, formatted as a percentage, and highlight all the averages that are less than 70%. Now, these are some of the kind of questions that you might get, and you might say, well, I wonder about this. I wonder about this. My suggestion is that you write it up into a question like this, and then you break it down from there. So create an average of your posted percent per course section. So the first thing you're going to do is I'm going to choose my which template I'm going to start with. So I want the average of my posted percent. Now, I wish this was in person, because it's in person, I would ask you, why am I saying average and why am I saying percent? Well, because I know that percent is an actual number, and I can do the average of that. So basically what this question is saying is I want to get the average of all the grades in this course. And then I can also break it down by section and see if there's a difference in the sections. Okay, so in doing that, I'm going to start with insights. And I'm going to do probably posted by course. You could do it with any of these because you're learning how to drag your own fields over. But I'm probably going to start with posted by course. And by the way, keep in mind the difference between posted and in progress. In progress is the gradebook in the teacher's gradebook at that moment. Posted, think of it as their report card grade, their final grade. It's the grade that's actually the teachers have clicked at post, and it's going to get stored somewhere. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to, you guessed it, go take out my early warning. I want the average posted percent per course and section. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to break it down, and I'm going to do my fields. I want it per course and per section. So I don't want the student, actually I probably do want the student name in case I want to check my data. Posted score, I would go ahead and put posted score. I'm going to go ahead and take off both of these. I don't want the count of students or that. I want my course name, but I also want my course section. So I'm taking the task, and I want my course section number. Now, the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take an average. So I got to make sure that I choose something that's going to give me an average, and I did want posted. So when I'm looking at these, I know that posted percent is one that I can do a mathematical formula on. So I'm going to take posted percent and I'm going to drag it. And I don't want sum of all of those. That's not going to help you. But the question said, I want to know what the average of all the percent, all the posted grades are for this course, and broken down a little bit more by section. So I'm going to change the sum now. And instead of using, we've used distinct count a lot. I'm going to change it now to average. And when I click apply, on the average. Now, this is not a good one. I don't want to do that. I'm going to change it to a, I'm not going to change it. I don't even like a bar chart for this one. I actually like a scatter plot. I like the scatter plot. And the reason I like a scatter plot is because on the scatter plot, I can actually get a good visual of where all the grades are in relation to like what I would consider a passing score, a failing score. And so when I look at this, I'm going to also make sure that I go in and I make sure everything else, I have no other filters that are set. And I do have some filters set on the posted score. Now, the filter that I have set on the posted score is it's going to select everything except I do not want the P's. They won't have a percentage anyway. And I do not want anything that's blank because I don't want by chance it to have a 0% anywhere. So I click apply. It doesn't change my graph, but I can still see now. I can quickly go across here and take a look. And as I'm looking at this, I can see that here is, if I want to break it down a little further, all my courses that have averages of all their student grades that are posted that are below a 70. Now, if that's a little difficult for you to see, then you can also click and you can do the grid view. And the grid view, here is a list of all those courses, and I can get the average of their posted percent. So all the students that are taking that course, this is a list of all of their grades. Now, another thing that's important for this, if I was looking and trying to do some analysis on this, if I only have one student or two students enrolled, that doesn't tell me a whole lot. So you might want to, on your fields, if you're doing something like this, I might want to find that student person ID, and I may want to just not sum it, but I want to count, or distinct count's going to give you the same thing because each student should only have one grade. But I'm going to click apply, and that's going to tell me, well, here's the average for American History 1, but they only have one student in that course. And so that's telling me that, you know, if I go down and look, there's 20 students in this course. And their average is about an 83. So those are some of the things that you can look at and use for the analysis. And if you're looking at all of your posted grades for your entire school, there's 153 students that have posted grades. And here is the grand total, here is the average percent of all those posted grades. So the average percentage is about 84.5. I did this by section number. So if I wanted to open this a little bit further, and I want to look at this one under health and PE. Health and PE, there's only one, I'm trying to remember which one. This one. There's section 1. They have a 80 posted percent. Section 85, they have a 65 posted percent with 4 students. So you could actually take the same report, and if you wanted to, I could, instead of section number, I could actually break this down by teacher and click apply. And now what happens is I'm seeing a failure rate for not a failure rate, but an average of the posted percentages by teacher within a course. Now, if I go back down to this one and I look at, test data is so hard to get good data to see. Well, you can see the teacher's name. If there's more than one teacher, it would actually have all of their names, and you would be able to see the failures by that. So let's do what we did earlier. Let's try it one more time. I am going to format these percentages now to be sent percent. So I'm going to click on Format Cells. I'm going to choose my percent, posted percent. I'm going to change my decimal places to 0. I'm going to format it as a percent, and I'm going to click Apply. I'm going to panic a little bit because that doesn't look right, but then I'm going to come over to Fields, and under my average posted, I'm going to change that. Oops, sorry. Oh, I forget. When I drag it over like this, I cannot change it. I'm going to put in my new formula. I'm going to put the formula in again. And I'm going to say, I want the posted percent average. I'm going to drag it and I'm going to divide it by 100, or I could hit my division here on these formulas, and I'm going to click Apply. And what did I forget? My percent. Okay, and click Apply. Average posted grades. I forgot to format this. Decimal places. None. True. I have to do that again. And there's my percentages. And then if I wanted to see all the classes that are below, let's say all the ones that are below 70%, under my options, under my conditional formatting, under format, conditional formatting, I would add a condition and I would choose my average of posted grades. I want everyone that is less than 70%, so it'd be 0.7. Click Apply. Well, I actually did conventional formatting and I closed it too soon. And then I'm going to say I want to highlight that, and we're going to highlight it in yellow and click Apply. And now I have all of my students that are, all of my courses that are highlighted, that have a class average of their posted grades less than 70%. Okay. All right, let's do another one. Let's do one that I wanted to do the failure rate. What are the failure rates by teachers for all terms? Failure rate of by teachers for all terms. So the way that you're going to do that is I'm going to start over again, and I'm going to go down to my insights. And under insights, I'm going to choose my classroom performance, and I'm going to do my posted by teacher. Right now, I only have a few teachers that I've posted in this training site, but I'm going to post by teachers. And the next thing that I'm going to do is the question is, what are the failure rates by teacher for all terms? Okay, so the first thing is I'm going to click my filter, and I'm going to make sure that my early warning, I've selected everything because I want all my students and all my teachers that have something. I'm going to go to my posted score and make sure I'm going to take out the P. In this training site, it's got a P. I'm also going to go to, I think the question was for all terms. If you had just wanted it for one term, then you could actually add in the course grading term, and I could choose just one term, but I wanted it for all terms. So that's why I'm selecting all. Also, another one that I haven't really talked about in this, but I talked about it earlier, your student active today. If you only want the failure rate for the students that are currently enrolled in your school to as of today, then you need to set your active today equal to true. So this one would say just true. I have it on true and false because I'm in the previous school year, just so I can have some more data. Okay. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to change my chart because that doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. Now, this right here is, remember your posted grade is an actual text field. So it's seeing all of these as text fields. I don't want my posted score, which is my grade. My posted score, I do not want it to show. I want it to look like this. And I want it to be by teacher, and I want it to click apply. Okay, now that's a little bit better picture there. All right, I'm also on this, I'm going to take out course name. I just want my failure rate for my teachers. Now, when I'm looking at this and I want to filter, and what I would look at is I would probably go down to where it says my posted score. And under posted score, I only want my failures. So with my failures, I am going to just go in and check all the ones that have a posted grade that is failed. Now, if you don't want to have to check those, you could also do the template that has the posted scores by tier, and then you could actually go in and just select the different tiers. But I chose to do it this way, so I only want the ones that are, I'm going to say 70 and below. Here's all my students that there's scores in there that are 70 or below. So here are the teachers. Now, if I wanted to change this and I want the failure rates by teacher, so when you talk about rates, you're not talking about counts. This teacher has 16 grades that are failing. If I looked at my grid, notice that I've got 19 students. These are 19 unique students because I counted it by students, but they have count of the grades of all these students. There's 30 grades that are failing for these students, but these are my unique students. If I go back to my field and I look at my students, that's my list of distinct counts. So think of it this way. That means some students failed a course more than one time, right? So I'm going to actually take that off because I don't want that. I only want the count, the number of grades that I have. So here's my number of grades that are actually failing. Now I want to look at their failure rate. So what I'm going to do under my fields is I'm going to add a new calculated value. And in that new calculated value, I'm going to go down and I'm going to choose my person ID, but I'm going to now change it to my percent. Oops, sorry. And I'm going to change it to the percent of the column. And I'm going to drag it down. Now, why am I counting person ID? I'm counting person ID because this is aggregating it by the students and by their student grade. So it's actually counting. I have 3 students. What percentage of 3 of 30 are those students failing? So if I click apply here, oops, I did what I always forget. This is percent. Percent of failing grades. Now I'm going to click apply. And I can quickly notice that looking at my data, Mr. or Ms. Williams, whomever this is, 51% of my 30 failing grades are coming from this teacher. And so again, I would probably want to format this. I'm going to format my cells. I'm going to do my percent of my failing grades, change my decimal place to 0, my percent to true. Click apply. Don't panic yet. I'm going to go to my field and I'm going to change where it says percent of failing grades, and I'm going to add divided by 100. And now I've got a nice little percent that I can show. And now this is something that is easier to read. Also, if I did a chart on this, the chart, and I change it to percent of failing grades, look at my chart. My chart now has my percentages instead of just numbers. And because I did that little formatting trick, I now get my percentages. And again, this is a good chart that you can quickly look at and see, 52%. I do want to show you that if I change this around and I want different colors on, if I move course teacher up here, what you're going to have to do is change your formula. Instead of it saying percent of column, I'm going to change it to say percent of row, or I can change it up at the top and drag it down. But to me, it's a lot faster just to type it and click apply. It gives me the exact same thing. except it just now gives me in a nice, pretty color format that I can use. All right, so there are a few dashboards. I think we have made it through most of these. What I didn't do is if you wanted to do the highlighting again, then in the highlighting, you would actually just go back to your format options and do your conditional format. And then I can add my condition and change the color. And again, any of the conditional formatting that you do is only going to be applied to your actual grid that you choose. And it's going to format it on the grid. It's not going to format it on your chart. Okay. I think I have one more and I've got time. I got 9 more minutes. Let's do one more. I want to do the percent of event types by location. All right, so what are the percent of event types by location? And even though I have this set to percent, I want my percentages on this one also. All right, so when I do this, I'm going to, first of all, I'm looking at event types. So event types, I know within the system that event types are attached to a code such as the fighting, the disrespect to staff, the truancy. Those are all event types. But what I want to do is I want to see where are the majority of my events happening. And so I would choose, let's break it down to what we would need first. It says percent of events by location. So I know that under insights, I'm going to go to my behavior and I'm going to go to events, and there's not an event by location. So I'm just going to choose one and I'm going to build it. So I'm going to do events by grade. I'm going to go in and take out, select all for my early warning. I feel like I've said that 100 times today, but when I first started doing this, I kept forgetting to do that. And I wouldn't see all my data and I couldn't figure out what was going on. The next thing that I'm going to do is you have to filter well. So in event row, I don't want victims. I only want offenders. And I'm going to click again. I'm going to select my data. Now this is a pretty good aggregation, but under my fields, I don't really care about a student grade. I don't really want the student grade, but what I do want is I want the event location. So I'm going to find the incident location and I'm going to drag it. Now I'm going to leave it here because right now it's counting all the unique students. These are your unique students. These are the number of events that happened at that location. So I'm going to click apply. And I'm going to change my chart to my bar chart. And again, it's a little bit better, but I really don't want to see all of these different ones. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take off count of behavior, and I'm going to find my event ID because I actually just like working with that, with the IDs. So I'm going to do the event. Actually, I think I have it up here. Person. I'm going to do person instead of incident ID. I'm going to do person. Because I want a count of the events. And so aggregating it by person would work just as well. Except I always forget. I don't want to drag it on. I'm going to create it. So I'm going to do person ID. And I'll take this person ID and I'm going to change it to count because I want the total number. So I want the total number of students. And now I'm going to change it to students. I want the percent. Percent by location. And I want to do the percent of your column. I'm going to drag it down. Percent location. I'm going to click apply. I'm going to take off the event name because I really don't care what events. I just want to know how many incidents are at this location, and I'm going to click apply. And when I look at this, I now notice that I have 51% of my incidents are happening in the classroom. Now, again, to format that, I want to go in, and you would format it with the percentages. You would change your cell to no decimal places, set it to true, and then I'd go in and do my divided by 100. But I'm going to save some time there and not do that. But when you're looking at this, notice that this actually gives me a different viewpoint, because what I'm looking at is this is a classroom management issue. But how did I get that? By aggregating my data and changing up my fields, changing my formula. And now I can see that classroom management, there's an issue happening within the classroom. And then you could drill down even further and aggregate it by saying, well, what events actually happened within the classroom? And I can click the event name. And then what it does is if I click the plus, now I've got more that I can do. And I can also aggregate this data. This is giving me the count of the students, but if I do percent by the location, it's also going to give me the actual percentages if I aggregate it that way and I do my formula. And that's a lot of formulas, a lot of aggregation. I will give you just one other little tidbit. I have used a lot the MAX formula that you can see. Let's see, if I click here and I find a sum or a count, there is one that says under your, there is sum, you are going to see something that says max and min, all right? I have used that before when I'm aggregating testing data. And so under testing data, I had to build my own to aggregate the testing data, but when I aggregated the testing data, the max and min, if a student has done a retest on a state test, then I would have it put in the max percentile. And so of the two, it would take the highest that student has scored. And so that is a good use of the max and min. You could also, and we don't have time for this, but you could also with max and min, if you were at the district level, doing some comparisons with GPA, and you could do the average GPA by school, and then you could also do the max and min. What is the minimum GPA at this school? What's the maximum GPA at this school? And to do your GPA aggregations, you could build your own ad hocs to do that, or you can come into Pivot Designer, which is very similar to Insights, but under Pivot Designer, you can also aggregate using GPA. And that's it. I think we're out of time. If you do not mind, please, in the last 2 minutes, if you will go and do your feedback, I would appreciate it. And if you can multitask, if there's any questions, and if you didn't put them in the form and you want to unmute and ask your question, then feel free to do that. But Chris, if there's any questions, let me know.
Yeah, the only question I'm getting ready to answer here in just a second. This is pretty common for accountability folks at the district level or MTSS folks at the district level. We know that you have to pull, you have to be in a calendar to look at Insights dashboards, but can you pull in ad hoc from across the district is the question.
Yes. Yes, thank you, Chris. Yes, you can. So for example, I can pull this data here that I have, this test data. This was created from an ad hoc, and these fields here are an ad hoc that I created, pulling the fields that I wanted. And now I can aggregate this, and this is aggregated at the district level. And so if you want to do district level data, the only way that you can do that is you build your own ad hoc, and then you can go into data export and use Kubanalysis to do that. Or you can go into reporting and you can use Pivot Designer. And I'm not as big a fan of Pivot Designer, and I think it's more of my experience. I actually personally like to just pull the ad hoc fields that I want. And then I come up to data export and I do Kubanalysis. And Kubanalysis looks exactly what we just it looks like what we just did with Insights, except I'm using my own fields to aggregate the data. And at district level, that's the only way you can aggregate it at the district level. Good question. Any other questions? All right. Thank you all for joining at this 3 o'clock on the Monday afternoon.